We're live.
Good morning. Good morning from New Orleans, Louisiana, ELPIS colleagues. It's a pleasure to see you this morning. Thursday, February 24th, here in New Orleans, Carnival is in full swing. The streets are crowded. Traffic is terrible, but I wish you could be here to enjoy it with us. The weather is beautiful. Unfortunately, this morning, we also send our regrets and best wishes to the people of Ukraine. We awoke this morning to the terrible news, and we send them our best. God bless them. And thanks again to the professors Dimitrios and Vasco and all at ELPIS, all the leaders for this opportunity to speak and share experiences about teaching law in this area, in this era of unusual circumstances and developments. So I'm going to offer you today my modest and yet bold contribution on the topic of my best course ever. In 35 years as a law professor, I just finished last term teaching the most successful course I have ever taught. I want to get your attention. Oftentimes we start to fade away quickly in these presentations. So I'm going to show you, I and my colleagues are going to show you 2 minutes of a video that 3 of my students produced in the middle of our international law class last semester. First, let me introduce them, my teaching assistants. Elle Day, Elle, I couldn't get by without them guys.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you.
And Michelle Lepresti.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you.
All right. Here's the video. It's 2 minutes. Don't go away. It's just to show you what these students these days with technology can really do on team projects. Those were the 3 students who made the video.
On December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 took off from London's Heathrow Airport, heading for New York City. At 6:56 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the flight made its last contact with ground control. 7 minutes later, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded in midair. As the plane's fragments rained down over Lockby, Scotland, it was clear that all people on board the flight had died. The victims included 259 passengers and crew members and 11 people on the ground. The passengers came from 21 countries, 190 of which were American citizens. The disaster has been described as one of the world's most lethal acts of air terrorism and one of the largest and most complex acts of international terrorism ever investigated by the FBI until now.
So there you see the opening of a 15-minute video about international law and the Lockerbie plane bombing. As you will see soon, this course was a team-based course, and the students were divided up into teams, and they did major presentations and minor presentations on topics from our textbook, as well as on cameo topics related to smaller issues, discrete issues in international law. I could tell as the semester progressed that the students were really into this, and I was really into it, and it went really very well. Can we make this slideshow go? Okay. Go ahead again. Okay. Because it's team-based, I want to give special thank you to our friend, your colleague and mine, Professor Arndt Künicke from Germany, who is the wizard of team-based teaching and has given me inspiration. And I think the last time we met in Hanover, Germany, he actually showed us a very dynamic team-based film that he had made. So Arndt, if you're out there, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Okay, all right, this is the start of the course last semester. Of course, it started in late August and went to late November. Teaching international law these days is a real piece of work, huh? We all know this news, but we were surrounded with it, and our students really addressed and studied many of these issues. A lot of them were really into climate change and environmental issues. The COP26 conference was in Glasgow at this time, so it was a lot of fun. Africa, many of our students are into all the issues from food insecurity to the civil wars in Africa. Of course, Hong Kong, the threat to democracy and rule of law there, South China Sea, everybody, you know, they love to study things like this. And then, of course, the threat to Taiwan, very complicated, it's very sophisticated issues that we went after, all right? The Uyghurs, we heard some testimony from European colleagues about the Uyghurs, okay? And overall, as probably your semesters, the course was divided into 28 lectures. Oh, I shouldn't say lectures, I should say 28 events, because sometimes I didn't lecture so much. Sometimes I did. For the first 2 weeks, I was the sole lecturer, getting them into the fundamentals of the international legal system. And then the students actually took over the instruction, supplemented every day by me, introducing the day and the latest events in international law, and then teaching a little law, and then they would go, and I'll illustrate that for you, okay? We had 28 classes, 75 minutes each. We had 5 quizzes. These are called readiness quizzes, because in team-based learning, if people don't stay abreast and accumulate the basic fundamental knowledge, they're lost by the time the course is a third into it, okay? We had the 40 students were divided into 13 teams, and each team had to give a major presentation, which I'll illustrate on a substantive topic in our textbook. These were 30-minute presentations, followed by 13 minor team video presentations. We had too many students. We could not present all of the second smaller presentations unless we put them on video. We were able to show a few of them in class, but the rest we posted on our internet resource called Canvas. You may use it. You've probably heard of it. It's a very functional medium through which you can administer the quizzes. You can post every lecture every day. You can post all the presentations, as well as announcements and extra resource articles, supplemental writings, things like that. Okay, at the end, and I'll discuss it in more detail, we, at a student's suggestion a couple of years ago, we invented an old-fashioned French Enlightenment salon discussion, and I'll give you a picture in a minute. But on the last day of the class, we had a salon discussion, after which the students were discharged to go home or wherever, and then they would have to write a 3-page reflection on what they thought was the most vital issue in international law today. So we planned it to be the perfect culmination of all of the 3 months, the many classes, and the hours they spent on their presentations. This would all come to a blossoming flower at the end, so that they could write something meaningful about what they thought was the most important issue in international law today. The textbook, we were lucky. Our law school subscribes to a service with one of the major publishing companies, And so this small horn book, as we call it, basic book of instruction, is online, and it was free to our students. So nobody had to pay money for a book. It's very significant in the United States, where your typical law textbook costs
$300.
$300 maybe. I mean, it's outrageous. Anyway, I guess the price of paper is expensive. Okay, all right. We told them early on, because it was a team-based course, we would enliven it with action-oriented activities, which we did. Team projects, breakout groups. From time to time, we would just stop the class and make them go get in their group and answer a question. Sometimes we would give them a homework assignment and tell them, okay, between now and class tomorrow at 9 o'clock, get with your group and answer this question. So we broke them out for contact and to generate real thinking. We did polling, which was just electronic questioning, right? Okay, everybody, look at your computer, answer this question, bang. Just trying to liven it up from the old. You know, when I went to law school, there was this guy out there reading words, and I didn't do so well as a listener, I'm afraid. Okay, and then international discussion and debate. Frequently throughout the semester, we Zoomed in colleagues, mostly from you and from other friends in Europe, to ask about current events and opinions. Okay, and we had a class government. Most of the American students don't understand parliamentary democracy, so we actually formed a government. We had 2 elections, maybe 3, as we tried to get a prime minister and a full coalition. So it was really interesting for them to see a multi-party election happen. Okay, team-based learning, TBL, it's truthfully a lot more work for the teacher. Art will be the first to tell you that, because you have to do all of this planning and dividing and teaming and picking topics and then offering feedback as well as being in the classrooms. But it's really something worth trying, or maybe modified team-based learning. Okay, from the typical my day in legal education where I sat there painfully, I just didn't sit still well. I was one of those children, you know. But in team-based learning, they're having to interact all the time with each other on specifically focused topics, and they have to reach an end, a target. They've got to put together a report or presentation. And then secondly, they had to put together a video, for goodness sake. And I just couldn't believe it when we saw the first video. I've got my iPhone, my new iPhone here, they laugh at me, but these kids can do anything with these things. Okay, high student motivation, just the peer pressure. And I think the stimulation of, they're going to come up here and teach. They get going. It's a learner-centered mode of instruction. The class time is largely for application. Probably in my case, it was probably only half, maybe 40%. The rest was lecture. But what drove it was them knowing they were going to get up here. After like the second week, every class, there would be a student presentation, okay? Materials relevance to real-world problems was explicit. As I mentioned, every class we opened up with, oh my Lord, we've just sailed another aircraft carrier through the Taiwan Straits and China's shooting flares at us or something. So we really did keep it oriented. In international law, it's maybe too easy to do that because there's so much crazy stuff going on these days, okay? All right, now the first team project was 35% of their grade, 13 teams, and they had a chance if the topic didn't work for them or their team didn't work for them, then we would adjust it. We did not let the teams pick themselves. The literature says don't do that. One of my teaching assistants said, yeah, well, if we get together with our friends, I know I'll just end up doing all the work. And it's probably true. That's because they're leaders, right? So we picked the teams intentionally as best we could. We didn't know everyone, but keeping cliques apart. And all that we have heard is that was fine. One of my TAs almost killed one of her teammates. The person was really obnoxious, but that's another story, right? Okay, all right. 13 teams splitting, I'm sorry. Okay, we said that. All right, here we go. And 2 weeks later, the first presentation started. Now, for example, this is where our textbook kicks off. The first chapter, chapter 3, I lecture the first two, right? Chapter 3, the law of treaties, the foundation. In the first 2 weeks, we go into the history of international law and what international law really is and what it isn't. Well, we learn it's customary international law and treaties and some other things. So we start with treaties. So here we go. 3 students come up dressed up in front of the class and they take turns delivering a PowerPoint and speaking one after the other on our chapter. What are treaties? Oftentimes I would probe them with another little extra fact or question to say, what about this? Is this a treaty? So that's what they did there. Team 2 introduced us to the United Nations. Team 3, the International Court of Justice. Team 4, the International Criminal Courts, as we know there's more than one, okay? And we'll see the document on the team. I hope we'll see the document. Here we go. Oh. Can they see the document?
Yeah, they can see it. It's on share screen.
Okay. All right, so there you can see it. I can't. Yeah, that would help if you could move it over. Here we go. Okay, as you see, law of treaties, United Nations, international blah, blah, blah. Then international economic law and the WTO, international human rights law, international environmental law. There we go. Right. International health law, law of countermeasures and the use of force, the law of the sea, team 12, immigration law, of course, a hot topic. And then our last team was our Jessup team that taught us about their contest, their competition, the problem and the legal rules and their arguments. So that went very well. So that's 13 30-minute presentations over the course of the first 2/3 of our class. Okay. We allowed the team members to participate in any way they wanted. Everyone was not forced to speak. You could be a writer, you could be a researcher. You just had to tell us what you were doing because you were going to be graded on it. I think actually everyone decided to be a speaker. Did everyone speak?
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
everyone spoke, but we left that to them. Some people are better in other positions. Okay, and then here we had the second shorter, because we were running out of days in our course. We went to the 15-minute presentations, and I and the TAs went to work picking very narrow but relevant topics. Can we see the topics? We let them bid on the topics, and it worked out great. Very few people bid on the same things, and then we flipped the coin. But the team topics, obviously the first one was the Lockerbie bombing and how that played out in international law. Here we go. Team 1, Libya. Team 2, the Rohingya genocide. Team 3, Scottish independence. Team 4, Germany to pay $1 billion in reparations for genocide in colonial Namibia. Team 5, the US and Afghanistan. Then Yemen, Tigray, Rwandan genocide, international law and digital services taxes, Palestine, Israel, Iran funding non-state military actors, and then Syria and international law today. Isn't that great? I mean, those topics are just very, very relevant, very dynamic. And again, often we would collaborate with students in Germany, France, Portugal, Lithuania, or Russia. This presentation was worth 20% of their grade. Okay. All right, you saw the document. Okay. Now, the end of the course was the famous, if you Google it, image it, this is the picture you get about a salon. Women were finally introduced, into discourse with the men, and these were product of the Enlightenment, where people discuss current issues. And the TA who came up with this idea was Jillian, a dear friend who's now a law graduate, and it went so much better than we ever expected. So we had each team take a topic to present during our final class. We're all around, and 13 people are going to stand up and give a very short summary of their opinion and their research on a particular topic. And here they are. Each team. Okay, we have a topics document.
Yes, we do.
Okay, can we do it? Okay, the Salon team topics. Okay, what are the two most important treaties? You may remember team one taught the law of the treaties. Okay, what are the two most important treaties in existence or in negotiation today, and why? Team two, what recommendations would you make to make the United Nations more effective? Again, reflecting team two had done the major presentation on the United Nations. Team three had the ICJ, and their question was, how well does it work today? How would you improve it? Team four, the International Criminal Court, the same pointed question. Okay, all the way down to what is the state of international human rights law today? What one thing would you recommend to improve it? 13 different questions, and all this in 3-minute to 4-minute presentations in our very final class. It was quite interesting. Then, okay, they had to write the final reflection paper. After they delivered their Salon presentation as a team, one speaker each team, then we all shook hands and clapped, and everybody got to go home. And they had 3 days in which to privately write their individual reflection paper, right? What is the most significant issue in international law today? And at the end of the 3 days, they had to submit it to me, by email, okay? Again, reflecting. And we all know, having taught for many years, that sometimes things work well, sometimes not so well. In this semester, it just clicked. Okay, also, we had people who would volunteer to get extra points for class participation if they would brief historic cases, in which case they would come to the front of the class and they would give a 5-minute presentation, usually with a few slides, on a famous international law landmark case. Again, students involved, dynamic, and pretty cool. Covering the landmark international law cases. Okay, you may know the famous Paquette Havana case. That's just an example of one of the cases that they did. Okay, so they were graded on 35% for their first team presentation, 20%. The readiness quizzes was 15, general class participation was 15, and their 3-page reflection was 15. So there was no final exam. We had worked them over all through the semester. So I mentioned that every class began with current events, trying to bring it into relevance. Okay, we gave them free access. Our school buys it. They had free access to the Financial Times and to the Economist, which are both very expensive and don't let you in all day. They also had free access to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and that we paid for, but they got free. And when I sent them often to Deutsche Welle and AFP, so that they really got a taste for international views on current events. So we did our best to bring them everything there was to get. And then one last thing I want to add. I was required, I think all of our faculty were required to go to a colloquium one day from this man whom I thought was kind of silly. He was going to tell us how to teach better. And he was a very kind person. We're law professors. We're not really so kind. But he said, let me make a number of recommendations, but one of them, I just on a lark, I took him up on it and I tried it. It was to distribute with the syllabus at the very beginning of the class, a 2-question questionnaire. One saying, where are you from and why do you want to take this course? Something like that. And the second question was, what experience have you had in international law? I do this in every course now because I read them before the first class or before the second class sometimes. But all of a sudden, these people are different human beings to me. I know the one who taught horseback riding in Africa. It's amazing what some of your students have done. Some of them are great soccer fans. Some of them have already had a career. Some have children. So I really recommend this little technique. If you want, I'll send you a copy of the questionnaire because it just cuts some ice with some of the people. And as a teacher, we want every advantage we can get to break through that wall. Okay, the class spirit was high. They seemed to delight in being in on the action. And I think part of this was our luck. I think, Elle, you may have said this. Michelle said this. It was their first time being back in the classroom after being at home for a year of COVID restrictions. So maybe we got advantage of their happiness of coming back to school. That probably was a lot of it. Anyway, and at the final class, I have to tell you as a professor, there was a loud ovation. Not for me, I think for the class. I was gratified to say the least. Later, I saw the evaluations, they're all computerized. 81% of the people who answered gave the top mark of a 5. The next 19%, the other 19% gave it a 4. There was nothing lower. Those are, in our standards, very high evaluations. And that's one reason why we come to work, right? To teach. Several people came up and wanted to shake hands, and one student brought me a shirt. It had international flags all over it, so it was silly. But that's the course. We pulled it off, and I'm teaching it again this semester with these TAs again. And I think it's going well. We're about a third of the way through, and we'll see. But I hope to talk more to you about this when I see you at the ELPIS conference. And I sure thank you for listening, and thank you.